All right. With that, we'll move into the approval of the agenda. Hopefully you guys have had time to take a look at it. So can I get a motion to approve? Thank you, sir. Second? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Opening up the public comment period. You guys have 3 minutes for anyone from the public who might want to speak. Just 3 minutes, right? All right. Seeing none, we don't have any submitted public comments, so we'll keep moving here. We'll jump into the state and federal agencies, starting with VDOT, sir.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. No new updates, a couple of reminders this morning. First, our VDOT's FY 2026 to FY 2031 6-year improvement program spring public hearing is scheduled for April 24th at our district office in Suffolk from 4 to 6 p.m. So just want to remind folks, you're going to be able to come out for that. Also, just a reminder for revenue sharing and the Transportation Alternatives Program, both programs, the SMART portal has opened up for your pre-applications. It opened up yesterday and closes at 5 p.m. on May 30th. So please be sure to get your applications in before the deadline. That's all I had this morning.
Thank you, sir. DRPT.
Yes, good morning. My name is Dan Sonnenklar. I have a few updates here. First of all, our FY 26 5303 funding opportunity will be opening on May 1st within our grant application portal. That's web grants, and that is for the MPO funding for the FY 26 cycle. So please be sure to check in on that. We also hosted an NPR webinar on March 21st. We recorded that, so it is available on our YouTube page if anybody is interested. It's about various different MPO related processes and programs. In addition, we wanted to remind people that the VTA, that's the Virginia Transit Association annual meeting, registration is currently open for our transit partners throughout the state. We encourage you all to register yourselves and your staff members. The DRPT 6-year improvement program for FY 26 is currently under development and will be brought to CTB in 2 weeks, I believe, on April 16th. So that will include all of the funding for the Hampton Roads region and all of the transit partners down here and the rest of the state. In addition, at the same SIP or 6-year improvement program spring meeting, our director and staff will be there to answer questions about transit programs as well. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Report.
Hey, good morning. No update at this time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Military. All right. FHWA. All right. Then we'll move into the approval of the consent items. We have 2 there. I'll approve them as a block here. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We'll get into our presentations here. Mr. Lewis, I know you believe you're introducing the speaker.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. This is the 3rd in a series talking about transit, and we are very proud with Suffolk Transit to be able to give you an update. This is a fairly young organization, and we have grown a lot and are making great strides. And with that, I'd like to introduce Maria Petrowski, our manager, and she will overview our program.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Maria Tukowski. I am with Suffolk Transit. I'm the transit manager for the city of Suffolk. And I'm going to give you a little update and a little bit of information about our Suffolk Transit system. So firstly, what is Suffolk Transit? We're the public transportation system for the city of Suffolk and the connecting areas, and we were established on January 2nd of 2012. It's managed by me and operated by Virginia Regional Transit. They are our contracted transit provider. We're funded through federal, state, and local sources, and our operating budget for FY24 was over $2.1 million. What does Suffolk Transit do? We operate 6 fixed routes with 179 active bus stops. We provide bus shelters at 13 bus stops and benches at 4. We connect to HRT services at 3 locations. We also operate a complimentary paratransit service, and that operates within 3/4 of a mile of all of the fixed route. And then the city of Suffolk, even though we are run by a contractor, we own all of the infrastructure, meaning that we own all of the buses, we own all the bus stops, um, and we are actually going to be building ourselves a operations facility as well. So our goal with owning the infrastructure is because we are contract based, that if something were to go on in our next RFP and BRT is not our successful bidder, we can just move another company in and Suffolk Transit looks the same to the public. Ridership, of course, as everybody, we experienced a decline in ridership due to COVID, but our ridership is now steadily increasing month to month. We've done some reconfiguration of routes, which we created some bi-directional service, getting rid of some of the big loops we were doing. We've extended evening hours from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and we started investing in transit promotions. So some of those things is we launched a marketing campaign for Suffolk Transit, which is the first that we've done since transit has existed. So we wanted to really kind of put it out there for the public to really know about their transit system. So we launched this for FY25. We printed banners and we have those displayed at City Hall and at the public libraries. We've got some A-frames that we'll put at some of the many special events we do throughout the city. And then we've been doing things like offering free bus passes to community organizations, churches, workforce development, Suffolk public schools, and more. We had a really good turnout of those community organizations wanting those bus passes for their clientele. And so we're hoping that that'll put more people on our buses as well. We also celebrate special days by operating free fares, and those are things like Transit Equity Day, Earth Day, election days, different kinds of things where you can get more people on the bus and help them be able to go to some of these events and things within the city. We have a social media campaign that's actively promoting our transit services. We printed a very simplified pamphlet that we distributed to city facilities that are open to the public. And then we created a promotional video and that we've been playing that on social media. This is our video. I don't know if we can get sound. All right, well, this is our promotional video that we made. Hopefully you guys can get a chance to check it out and hear the narration. And it essentially, we describe transit in a way that you can take time for other things when you're not having to worry about driving your vehicle, where you can get together with friends, you can read, you can listen to music, you can do all of these things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were driving a vehicle. So we're very proud of that video. And then, so technology and Suffolk Transit. So since 2017, passengers have been able to track their buses location using our ETA Spot app on their phones and through a website. We can do service alerts and announcements through Spot to let people know if we've got detours or service changes due to weather. It also can help with trip planning. And I find that it provides confidence for riders, especially if you're brand new, because you don't have to question whether or not your bus is going to come to you. You can look at your bus stop, you can see your bus, and you'll know exactly how long you have until it's going to be there for you. Looking toward the future, we've got quite a few Suffolk Transit projects coming down the pike. We are currently reviewing RFPs to do a 5-year update to our transit development plan. And that transit development plan is our roadmap for Suffolk. And so we're looking to do an update to see what we've done thus far that's working, if there's things we need to change, and if there's other things that we can do to further increase ridership on Suffolk Transit. And then in FY26, we're actually going to launch 2 commuter routes from Suffolk. One will go from Suffolk to Windsor, and then one will go from Suffolk to Portsmouth. And these 2 routes, it's our goal here to increase connectivity within the region, because Suffolk is a little bit of a standalone out there. So we're trying to do things so that we can connect not only people that need to get other places out of Suffolk, but those individuals that are trying to get to Suffolk as well. Windsor was very receptive to being a partner with us in this. They're very excited to create this commuter route that'll be able to bring people into Suffolk and people that need to potentially get to some of the jobs and things in Windsor as well. Portsmouth, we're excited about that because we're always trying to foster more connection to HRT, and that way we can really get people even further into the region than we are currently. And then our other Suffolk project that I'm really excited about is we're going to be building a Suffolk Transit Operations Facility. So phase 1 of this is going to be the construction of a parking lot with the secure lot for our transit vehicles. And then phase 2, we're going to actually construct the facility. We are currently working through design concepts with that now and trying to refine those designs so that we can get to a point where in the next fiscal year or so, we can actually break ground on the construction of our facility. And this will be the last piece of infrastructure for Suffolk Transit to own. It'll house not only me, but it'll house whoever our contractor is in the same building, providing even more oversight for our contractor, as well as them having a space that they don't have to rent anymore. And so everything will be housed in one spot. And then, any questions?
So I got a couple things I'd like to add in there that Maria did not touch on. One of the things we do, again, we're trying to make sure that we connect to the rest of the region and we're seamless as it comes to HRT. So while we're not a part of HRT, we're making those connections out. One other thing we do is we mirror HRT. Anytime HRT declares a special day and either suspends fares or suspends service for whatever reason, we're mirroring that. So again, to the people in the region, it all looks seamless. One other lesson we've learned has been very interesting, though, is with the growth of the Amazon facilities in our region. I would tell you, being a boomer, I drive everywhere I go. I very rarely look at anything, but the generations that are coming to these facilities, most of them are Gen Z, Gen Y, and they're looking for transportation. And it's amazing how many people are living outside of our city proper and yet wanting to commute into these facilities to work. And so we work very closely with those organizations too to make sure we try to match our routes to get people to work when they need to be at work, not when we want to get them to work. And again, that's one of those lessons I think sometimes we overlook when we run transit operations is we got to provide the service that people need when they need it. And again, I think we've done very well with them and with the Target warehouse, again, bringing a lot of people in and getting them when they need to be and then picking them back up and taking them out at the appropriate time.
I was actually going to ask about the Amazon, but the follow-up that I had was you talked about that app that shows how that is just for Suffolk or for someone who's saying getting on a Suffolk and connecting to HRT. Is there a way they can plan their trip saying that, okay, I need to get here so I can connect to HRT, or is it just the Suffolk service?
So if in terms of the app itself, that's just for Suffolk buses, but you can trip plan through that. And if that means connecting to HRT, because all of our transit systems are a part of Google Transit as well. And trip planning does a lot through that. So when you trip plan, like I could plan a trip from Suffolk that I'm trying to connect through to say Norfolk, and that trip planning will tell me what I need to do to catch what HRT bus. So it's a little bit of both, but in terms of being able to actively track the location of the bus, that's for Suffolk, but you can trip plan across the region.
Can you, John, can you go back to the slide with the ridership in the beginning? Okay. Two things. One, your dip doesn't seem to be as bad as, or as severe as other transit. And I'm curious to your thoughts on that. And two, you almost had no dip in 2021. So those two.
Yeah, so surprisingly, our dip for COVID did seem to happen a little bit later in the whole pandemic. And then we didn't have as much of a dip because we are a smaller system with the 6 fixed routes. Throughout COVID, we were able to run the entirety of our service. We never had to reduce hours. We never had to reduce routes. And all of those kinds of things did help us because we are smaller. For some of those larger systems, you ended up you didn't have the operators and those kinds of things. We got very lucky in the fact that we never actually struggled with operators for routes, and we had drivers that were very willing to help us be able to keep running service to the level that we were at. And all of those things kind of helped us maintain some of that ridership and it not dip as much.
Any other questions? Oh, yep, go ahead, Jamie.
I just wanted to mention that Isle of Wight's had some great conversations with Suffolk about different ideas for ways to extend some of Suffolk's services into Isle of Wight, both the 460 Windsor corridor with our industrial growth for commuter use in there, and also looking at options in the northern section for 17. We already have some HRT service going across the James River Bridge, and now also looking at Suffolk service on the other end of the 17 corridor. But one of the things I wanted to mention, as a rural county or fringe county, if you will, one of the resources that we've really found helpful is the idea of stacking our multimodal uses. We have a couple of VDOT park and ride lots, which HRT uses as bus locations, which we think also Suffolk Transit could use as bus locations, which we're also looking at developing as improved lots that would be better locations for traffic's van pool sites, and just encouraging them to actually be used as park and ride lots, which they're just not really used now. People tend to use our grocery store lots because the location is better known, there's better lighting, et cetera. So the idea of kind of creating these lots that were built for commuter locations into these multi-purpose commuter locations, they're actually very centrally located. People, a lot of them are just, they don't have good lighting, they don't have good visibility, they don't have good signage, and just finding them. One of them we didn't even know was there for a long time. One of them, we talked to the maintenance crew about putting in a bike rack, and so they went back there to mow, and they actually found that there was one already back there. So I think the idea of, kind of using some of the resources that we have or improving the resources that we have in some of our rural locations, we're not as far off the mark as we think we are. We're just not utilizing what we have as much.
Any other questions?
I got one more comment. So one of the challenges we've experienced in the last year or so, you all remembered about a year ago, we got some reports back with coming out of the census that there was some significant changes in the urban boundaries. Suffolk got pulled out of the Greater Hampton Roads urban boundary and got created into its own little boundary, but yet North Suffolk remained connected to the greater regional boundary. Now we've got split funding. So DRPT is handling part of it. Federal Transit is doing part of it. For good or for bad, these organizations don't always communicate together as well as we'd hope. And again, we've been struggling a little bit of trying to figure out exactly how to make all of this work. Thus far, we've got great support from DRPT. We say kudos to them. But again, that is one of those challenges going forward. Time always brings change, and change always brings challenge. And we just got to be ready to try to adapt to those changes and meet those challenges and figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit more. All of our routes, so 5 of our 6 routes are 100% in the rural region. We have one route that is 100% in the urbanized area. So our northern Suffolk route, that's our purple route that's in the northern Suffolk area that stays up in the northern Suffolk area is 100% urbanized. So right now we're trying to navigate how we're going to fund that particular route, since it does not qualify for those 5311 funds like everything else. So it's been a little bit of a challenge, and we're having to get a little creative, but we're working on it.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, moving on to the next item, item 9 here.
Good morning. Thank you again, Suffolk, for coming here today and talking about transit. So as Robert mentioned, you saw a theme in transit from HRT in February, WADA in March, and Suffolk in this month, and that was part of the feedback we received from the member engagement. So uh, what I wanted to talk to you about today is the TTAC member engagement that we did, I believe, last December, early this year. And I can't take credit for that idea because when I was talking to Greg Grutendorf, our PDC deputy, about committees and TPO, PDC, he said, well, why don't you have a check-in? I said, well, that's a good idea. So we had, our chair was very supportive. So we decided to do these one-on-one check-ins. Why did we do that? I moved here in 2020, peak of COVID. Don't recommend moving during COVID again. But that being said, when we came back in 2021, we noticed this transitioning of TTAC members. Some of our longtime members had moved on. We have newer members. So that's been on my mind, and some of our staff have talked about this. So we just wanted to have this check-in to say, okay, is this committee meeting the needs of its members? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are there things that work well? Are there things that don't? And I know there's a small project in our parking lot that happened over the last few months. So again, in terms of meeting logistics, is this a welcoming environment as you come in for TTAC meetings? So how did we do that? Carol, our chair, was able to join for many of these meetings. It was individual meetings, just 30 minutes check-in with each of our member locality and agency. And we had the standard set of questions. And what we wanted to understand was, again, many of these discussions were free flowing. But the main thing was, what are your thoughts on the agenda topic? Are there been topics that you are like, oh yeah, that is really something I've learned a lot? Are there topics you would like to see? And with the newer members, are there better ways we can engage with the newer members? And as we have some of our longtime members, we said, well, the things that we did in the past that we kind of dropped, maybe they were great ideas. Can we get back to it? And then just general feedback on meeting logistics. So I think each of these sessions were so helpful, and I really, really would like to thank each and every one of you for the time you took to provide feedback. So what I'm going to do with the next few slides is just talk about what is the type of feedback we received. I think everyone kind of said, the meetings are efficient. That was a unanimous feedback we got. The agenda layout with the consent at the top, discussion at the bottom, people enjoy that. There were some questions on the tip, which I will get into, the tip amendments. But I think the general thing we heard is, TTAC is the forum where each of our member localities and agencies come in to hear from each other, like what works, what doesn't work, what are our success stories. It provides that forum to say, okay, how does our locality or agency fit into the overall region, right? And the last one I'm really proud of, and I really want to thank all TPO staff because one of the things that they do, it takes a village, and I'll be honest, it's not the meeting day. There's preparation leading to the meeting day, starting with agenda. But you get John's emails, our staff giving feedback. And you've seen Kathleen before putting the 10 cards, with all of those things that need to happen, the sign-in sheet. But it's not just TPO staff. You see Rob Cofield in the background who's like, please turn on your mics, because he's worrying that someone watching on the live stream can hear you. So these are just small things that happen. But the one thing everyone said, thank you for the coffee. So again, can't take credit. Chris is the one who does that. So if you do see Chris, please thank him, because he's the one that's always here before any of us, making sure things are all working. But staff appreciated your feedback and your appreciation of the efforts, and that's something we really take great pride in. So wanted to bring that up. And in terms of agenda items, I think the general feedback again was the topics are useful, they're valuable, they're learning, they provide a learning opportunity. I think again, the regional studies you've heard from Keith Nichols and his team on safety, rail crossing, those always jump out because they kind of provide a comparison of how our region does. Dale Stith and her team on the long range transportation plan, as Dale's very good about keeping us on track to meet the deadline. So she will make sure that you all willingly or not, are involved in the LRTP process. So that's something that was talked about. The Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail, I think that was mentioned a few times, partly because it showed how a locality was able to use funding and approach funding to advance the trail. So again, that was how can a locality use approaches to be successful in funding. There are other topics like our flood sensors, HRT's microtransit pilots, and I know Kathleen gave a very brief overview on the TIP process, and a bigger one is coming, much broader, but they appreciated that. I know DRPT and VDOT always take the time to be at our meetings, and that was called out as well. I think it's helpful to have our state partners at the table. Of course, there was feedback that our military and federal would be good to have them. Just because of the impact the military has in our region, and also with all the changing guidance, it would be good to have federal. And that's something we'll keep working on, and hopefully we might be able to get them at the table more often. So potential topics. So then I said, okay, what are the topics you would like to see, right? So you've seen all the ones that worked. I think the feedback was, well, we like the focus on hearing from each other. But this one came up. People said it's great to hear success stories, but sometimes it's the challenges that help to know if another locality has had a challenge with the project, something didn't work, they had to pivot, or there's a funding shortfall. How did they approach it? So they thought those kind of things would be very valuable. And even regional studies, they said the comparison across our region to other metro areas are good, but can we get more specific on how a locality uses that information to identify a project need? Now, we might not get direct topics on this, but I'm just putting it out there. If there are things that your locality does that you think can be valuable, please let us know, and we'd be happy to have you on the agenda. So the next few slides, if I started listing every topic, it'll be a long presentation, and I don't want to do that. I did take very detailed notes during our check-ins, but I grouped them into categories so you kind of get a sense of what we are hearing. From the locality, it is always the funding. What are some successful funding approaches? What are things that they have done to get grants or other funding programs? There's always interest in knowing what's going on in other localities. Some localities gave us topics. Some were smarter. They said, we'll think about it and let us know. So we'll follow up with each one of you. And it's also where the rubber meets the road, like when the project gets implemented, what are some of the challenges they have? I'll come back to the right of way in a minute, but one suggestion that I thought was really good, the Transportation Programming Subcommittee meets here, discusses CMAQ, RSTP funding. There have been so many projects funded with this was funding source. Can we get an update on these projects, where they are, how have they moved forward? Just so it kind of closes the loop on how the subcommittee leads to the recommendations and the projects get implemented. Bike and pedestrian planning was something we heard pretty much across the board. There's so much interest in residents on these projects. So what can we share about them? And then a couple of other topics like school zone camera implementation. Some of our localities have done that. Can we share some lessons learned from them? Traffic calming, complete streets. And then with VDOT, and this comes from a joint, in fact, they suggested a joint one where we have VDOT come and talk about the right-of-way approaches from their perspective and some of the locality mechanisms that they can use. So again, these are just topics from a locality perspective. If we go into funding again, this was another topic, rural transit funding, rural funding. And I know things are shifting a bit with federal guidance and everything, and I know we try to put it under announcements saying, hey, this a grant opportunity is open if you need letters of support. But I think the feedback was, can you guys give a quick update on what this program's about? Who can apply? What are projects eligible? I think that was one that came up. Grant opportunities for trails came up over and over again, especially when they're multi-jurisdictional trails. How can some localities come together to advance these projects? The TIP process came up. So when VDOT, TPO, and central office finalized their process, there was interest in hearing about what that means in terms of TIP amendments and add mods. So when they see it on the consent, they at least understand how this all comes to fruition. And then again, when there's funding shortfalls, how are localities approaching it? So much changing in funding, project costs are going up. What are some approaches localities are using? Transit multimodal, we talked about it. Definite interest in hearing from all our transit agencies, understanding what are some efforts to enhance transit network connectivity. DRPT, there were some efforts that they have ongoing, and they said they'd be happy to come and talk about it. And another thing that came up was it doesn't always have to be from our region, right? Like, I think there's great examples in our region, but are there examples of bus rapid transit implementation from outside? For example, the Richmond area. How have other regions converted to light rail? Are there examples where, like we talked about the Amazon HRT Suffolk partnership, are they good examples where transit's at the forefront of this planning, all the way from planning to implementation? So just those kind of topics. With passenger rail, our stations on the peninsula and south side, I think, see some of the highest percentage increases across the Commonwealth. So can we get some updates from DRPT, VPRA on what's going on? And trail funding was always there. That's something that comes up all the time. And then with the Southampton Roads Trail and Trail 757 on the peninsula on the south side, how can we be consistent, or some examples of wayfinding signage? I know Rob Case, he's working with the Active Transportation Subcommittee on a working group for signage consistency on Southampton Roads Trail. So maybe that's something we can bring up at a future meeting when they're ready to come up with some suggestions. And then VDOT specific, again, just a general interest on any critical projects, in the next round of regional projects. And this came up like a few years ago when roundabouts were first implemented. There was a lot of presentations. Are there some other innovative intersection ideas that they have that can be brought up? And then scoring and funding, you heard from VDOT Central Office on the transportation alternative set aside the last month, I believe. Just understanding if so smart scale, what is the criteria, what are the deductions, how are projects going to be evaluated? So just hearing from VDOT was something that there was interest. And then finally, this is a catch-all of everything I could put on one slide. So this ranges from, can we get updates from the port? That's such an economic engine, which they've been very willing to come and do that. Emerging technologies, when you look at connected autonomous vehicles, what does it mean for our transportation system? What does it mean when we plan for 20, 30 years in the future? And I believe this was a comment where before we would have topics where we talked about some innovative trends and ideas from other regions. Can we come and have an update? Like today, for example, you have Rob Case is going to talk about a book, but that's again because it's got a lot of attention. We thought it'd be a good topic to share. There were some that are broader than transportation, like stormwater and emergency management, and I'll be happy to work with our PDC staff to see if they can come and talk about it. One that came up a few times is public engagement. I know we had Quan McLaurin from the TPO PDC talk about our public engagement plan, but this time it was more specific, like how are localities approaching public engagement when there's misinformation, when there's a challenging project? How did they pivot? How did they take the feedback? So again, any good examples of public engagement on projects would be helpful. And then any projects that balance planning, engineering, and the public. So I know I try to summarize a lot. If your specific feedback is not here, please don't worry, it's in my document. So that's something we will keep maintaining as we move forward. And then the member engagement, then we ask like, hey, you have newer members. How can we do a better job of making sure they feel welcome? And I heard this and I knew it myself. Sitting around this table when you're a new member can be overwhelming. You're like, what am I supposed to be doing? So then everyone said, well, can we have an onboarding document or a briefing? Just saying, okay, this is TTAC. These are the subcommittees. This is how TTAC's workflow into the TPO board. What is the member's role? What are the expectations? We do this for the board members at times. We have slides that we provide. And what I'm going to do is take that. I'll work with the principals for the TPO and so that they highlight. And the one thing someone said that made sense, highlight the importance of engagement. Because when your project is being discussed, be at the table. Otherwise, you're going to be at the board and your elected officials like, why is this project not there? And we're going, oh, we didn't know that was a priority for and it's hard to make that judgment call for your locality. So again, we'll take an effort to come up with this onboarding document, more of set of slides, which we'll share on our website and as well as with any new member that comes on board. The informal mentoring program, I'm not sure how to do this, but they said, well, can we match longtime members with newer members? So there's information sharing, ideas, and suggestions. When it comes to briefing, so I tried my best to explain acronym that I use, like LRTP. But in the briefing, can you provide a glossary of acronyms? And these are the ones that are used. So if a new member is like, I don't know what this is, they can look it up. This is a very good suggestion where for each topic, provide 1 to 2 introductory slides or a slide to provide the background so new members understand what it means or what are they going to be talking about. This one, I've mentioned it, and I know our chair talked about it previously, the rotating seating during meetings. I know we always used to have 10 cards. We removed them. You can move, sit wherever you can. You don't have to be where you've always sat. And the reason we do that is because, one, you get to sit next to a member from another locality that you've never sat before. The only request you say, if you're a member or an alternate, be sure that there's seating around the table for the members, because as you can see, we need to accommodate everyone. So yeah, please feel free to move around. You can sit wherever you want to be, or if you say this is the only seat I want to sit, that's fine as well. But this is just something I just want to put it out there, because I think I had a few people say, oh, we thought we had to sit here. No, you don't. You can sit wherever. And then this was another suggestion, like, can you consider hosting a TTAC meeting on the peninsula? Just because, so we always host it here. What I had suggested with their new operations maintenance center opens, that could be a potential, and that's something we'll look into. And a TTAC social, again, a very informal way for members to get to know each other. So these are all the ideas we got on new member engagement. So in terms of next steps, again, want to take the time to thank each and every one of you because of the feedback you provided. I really learned a lot. Reaffirm some of our, like, are we doing a good job? It really reaffirm some of the work that we're doing. We have potential idea topics, so we will be reaching out. But in the meantime, if you have any ideas, if you come across a topic that you hear would be great for TTAC, please do not hesitate to reach us, and we'd be happy to, just work with you on the agenda. So with that, I'm going to pause. And I really also, Carol's not here, but she was very supportive, and I really want to give a shout out to her as well. For her, she tried to join as many meetings as she can. So I really appreciate her support. With that, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any questions or any other suggestions that didn't come through when you talked with us earlier.
All right. Thank you for Pavithra. Going on to item 10, Dale.
Good morning, everyone. We did recently receive a request that will likely trigger an amendment to the long-range transportation plan, which subsequently would trigger the need for another regional conformity assessment. So we had just wrapped up one and received a finding for our previous conformity assessment. So we want to make an official call for amendments either to the long-range transportation plan or to the TIP. If it's for the long-range transportation plan, there is a form. It's actually available online. It's also an attachment in your agenda. For TIP amendments, Kathleen likes the normal request letter. If you're not sure, just reach out and call me or email me, and we can discuss whether or not it would be an amendment or an add mod. We're not quite sure of the timing. I know the agenda note says we'd like to have the information by April 9th, but with Smart Scale pending, and HRTPO still has to approve some funding modifications, we may wait till like May or June to process these, but we would like to know how many amendments we need to process in this next conformity assessment. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any. Again, if you're not sure, just reach out and call me and we can discuss your project.
Thank you, Dale. Item 11, Rob, you're up, sir.
Okay, hold on to your hats. Today I'm going to talk about a recent book called Killed by a Traffic Engineer. And I got to think the publisher was brilliant with that title. We sell a lot of books, I would think. The subtitle is Shattering the Delusion That Science Underlies Our Transportation System. And so that's a focus of this book. So I'm going to review it, give you some of my opinions. I'm interested in your opinions at the end, particularly. I put there the acronym KBATE. Thought it was interesting that it sounds like clickbait. So it's a very volatile title. Let's look at the problem, cause, and the hope that he lays out. And most of this is, of course, his opinion, not only the quotes, but interesting that more Americans have died on the roads than in all U.S. military conflicts combined. I thought that was interesting. He believes that traffic engineers have designed and built a system that incites bad behaviors and invites crashes. So we'll get into that. And then notes that all the other OECD countries have lower fatalities per person than we do. So maybe we can do better. The last is my thought. I think it is a powerful challenge to the traffic engineering and urban planning associated with this poor safety record. So it's not just, even though the title is traffic engineers, he picks on a lot of people, including planners, but also auto designers and everybody else. He is Wes Marshall. He teaches at the Colorado University at Denver, which is not the main campus. He's a civil engineer like myself. He's a PE and a PhD and has a BS from UVA. And then the book is 400 pages long, so it's pretty lengthy, and it's $35. I've listed the parts of the book. I won't go into that, but it's a lot of detail there. So first about this book review and not about the book, I'm going to provide an overview plus specific designs that we can use to improve safety. He didn't always supply what I'm calling solutions to his complaints, but most of them are obvious. And where they're not, I've labeled it TPO staff, which is me. His book, like I said, it complains about a lot of people, policemen, legislators, academicians, but I'm just going to focus on traffic engineers and transportation planners because y'all are in the room. All right, so now the book, it largely promotes traditional streets and alternative modes. And I apologize for reading a lot of this. I'll see what I can do. But he talks about, contrasts the roads that, were built before World War II and those that have been built since. And he says, and I think this is revealing, he says, I'm mostly looking for a world where a car isn't your only viable option. So yes, he is interested in safety, but he is also interested in the other benefits of urban designs and alternative modes. And so concerning design, he suggests replicating the parts of the city that work well. In other words, the older parts, the more grid-oriented parts. And he's not a fan of our our tendency to focus on hotspots. And not so much because that's a bad thing, but he feels that it detracts from looking at other things, sort of the overall picture, which he does at the end with categories of users. So taking a category, he takes all three of these and then says what could be done to help improve the safety of children, and then pedestrians and cyclists, and then users of public transit. So one of the interesting things I think that he gets into is the guidebooks. And so his stance is that the guidebooks need not prevent us from these designs that he thinks are valuable and safer. So he differentiates also between guidelines and standards. And so for guidelines, he mentions the Green Book, which interestingly enough, when I was first introduced to it, and maybe many of you, they literally called it the Bible. So that gives it, a lot of weight. And HCM and HCS, but the Green Book itself says it's not intended to be prescriptive, and that it looks for engineering judgment. Same thing even with the MUTCD, which does provide standards. He notices it mentions engineering judgment 167 times in the MUTCD. So a lot of things can be done without preventing these books from saying you can't do it. So on that note, he feels that we assume that the system will be safe if we follow these guidebooks. But he points out, and I think there's a lot of truth in it, that their guidance is not necessarily based on safety. In fact, the Green Book says that it's guidance based on established practices. So in other words, this is what people do. It's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily safe. This is what people do. And then he gives specific examples of the lack of a safety basis. For example, longer sight distances at railroad crossings was found to, like, what would you call a unintended consequence, causing drivers to drive faster and therefore no demonstrable safety benefit. Same thing as we'll see with the clear zones, but when they were instituted back in the 60s, he notes that little research had been done to show their benefit or lack thereof. And pedestrian signals found in the 80s to be no safer than not having a pedestrian signal. So what needs to be fixed? He feels that we blame the user of the system and therefore recommend education and enforcement instead of blaming the design of the system. And so he gives the example of 2 teenagers that were killed in Washington State and notices that the media talked about, the mistakes that they made, human error, didn't use a crosswalk, wore dark clothing. And even the police report didn't mention that the avenue that they were killed on is designed like a speedway and has bad lighting, bad sidewalks, and bad crosswalks. So he would say, even if there's human error, look for a design solution that can, ameliorate the situation. So speaking of those design changes, he feels that the Green Book promotes over-design. And in fact, 2 different editions there call for above minimum design values and higher design speeds whenever possible. So he would say, use design values that induce the speed that you want. So set a target speed and then use design to get people to drive that speed. And I can see the value in that. I don't mean to pick on Norfolk because this was done long before y'all were around, but this is actually Jeff's fault, I think. But anyway, Indian River Road is 6 lanes and straight and just looks like a highway, and people got killed on it. So they put 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on it. And it's just, I don't, it'd be very difficult to enforce that because, people, I think, drive to their conditions. I know I do. At least that was my argument when I got a ticket. Ticket in Matthews Courthouse at 3:30 in the morning. And I, reminded, I'm not sure I did remind the judge, but let's say I did, reminded the judge that not even any dogs were present at that time, and that I was driving to the conditions. Anyway, moving on, some design examples. Lane width, you're familiar with. Some evidence that narrower lanes reduce speed. Apparently it's not conclusive, but there is some evidence. As you might imagine, it makes sense. Then what do you do between the pavement and the edge of the right of way? This again is about the clear zones, but there's some evidence that again, they're counterproductive, that cause you to drive faster and then are more dangerous. And interestingly enough, we've all seen the value of tree streets, but I've never thought about them being a protective barrier between the cars and the vulnerable road users, which he notes. Street networks, for you planners, his dissertation found that the compact and connected street networks were significantly safer than other, what he calls sort of tree-like streets, cul-de-sacs and that kind of thing. And so he promotes the tighter streets. Urban design, he notes that crashes rates are crashes per mile. And so if we reduce miles, then we could reduce some crashes. And so he talks about bringing things closer together. In fact, my dissertation was about not so much that, but if housing is placed in the center of the metro, that people will drive less, not just because they use transit and bike and walk more, but because the places they're going to are closer. Sharrows, he noted that they create a higher risk, which makes sense to me. I feel like they give the cyclist a false sense of security, which they don't need because they're confronted with 5,000-pound vehicles. And my hunch is that they don't give the driver of those vehicles any caution. And so there's some evidence of that. Curb radii at intersections, of course, the tighter those are, the slower you're going to go around the turn there, or whatever, the intersection. Signal timing, you may be familiar with the Barnes dance. This was first implemented in Denver in the CBD and decreased the number of crashes there on pedestrians. It's where all the pedestrians go at once and no vehicles. And you can even go diagonally across the intersection because there are no vehicles. And then intersection types. Again, this was new to me. I mean, I think when I think about roundabouts, I think of, hey, I don't have to stop. But he noted the safety benefit of roundabouts. So just some of my opinions and takeaways where I agree and disagree, and then I want to hear from y'all. I agree that design matters. Like I said, I think people drive to the speeds that match the conditions out there. But unlike him, I think enforcement matters. And this is sort of a theme of his. He criticizes things that may be good because he thinks they detract us from other things that are good that we are neglecting. And like Chairman Mao, I say let 100 flowers bloom. I think we can do both. And so if y'all remember a year or two ago, I showed the crash fatality increase factors where I think it clearly shows that enforcement saves lives. Like him, I agree that transportation research is often poor or missing. There's only one or two of you in this room, Robert, that are old enough to remember when I presented on access management. And the mantra back then was that access management increases capacity, speed, and safety. And I looked into it, and there was almost no evidence for any of those three. The only thing I found was the benefits of coordinating in both directions, which, as y'all know, is hard to do unless you're in the Midwest. So I agree with him there. I disagree with him on the fourth bullet there. I think that if you spread your resources around the region, you know, we were talking about transit and getting out into the farmland. I think that you'll do better to identify areas for these modes and design the streets and networks accordingly and make your investments there instead of spreading your investments thinly to where it's not any good, but everybody has it, that focus it on those areas that you want to improve, and then let the market operate and people will choose where they want to be. I think spending money, this is another one where I disagree with him. He criticizes even measuring the cost of a life. And yeah, we're uncomfortable with that. But if you don't do that, then you don't spend your money cost effectively. You don't want to spend $100 million to save one life when you can spend $10 million to save 100 lives. So that's my thought. I do think the current guidebooks promote over design, but I'm interested in what y'all think because I'm not using those books every day. Like him, I do think that safety matters, but I also think travel time matters. He doesn't place a lot of importance on travel time. And the other thing is that I think in a democracy, we largely get the transportation, engineering, and planning that we want. Because there are pressures, y'all have pressures from elected officials, and we elect those officials. But I do think that shining a light like he's done can show significant imperfections in any profession, including ours. And I think we saw that in COVID with the epidemiology. You know, they weren't ready for it, nor would they be. But I think there are lessons to be learned from those shocks, and this may be a shock that can bring about some good changes. So with that, I'm interested in your questions and also, but mainly your thoughts and experiences. Yes, Sam.
I think that we can do a better job of learning international areas or other countries where they do a better job of, you know, whether it's using transit or, you know, like I've been to Spain where they have only roundabouts, so they have nothing to maintain in terms of traffic signals, hardware, and that type of thing. It's just a safer, you feel safer as you're driving it. I just think that the way that we built out our system in the US, we've almost gone in a direction that we have to continue that way. But yeah, we can always, like I said, learn from other great examples from other countries.
Has anybody else even raise your hand if you've heard of this book before? Okay. Okay. Somebody said that at VTRC that it's so, I don't know, so whatever, that there are online groups now that meet and discuss it. And so, yes, Jamie?
I think I would just say that maybe it is a little academic, and I think it misses the inherent conflict that we deal with in personal behavior, because we understand the push-pull between engineering and planning. You know, I mean, he's just advocating standard, you know, traditional neighborhood design, which we've all been for a long time. But the issue is we're dealing with it right now. I have an entire community that is against on-street parking and also against speeding. So if I take the cars off the street, we're gonna double the speed. You know, they don't want either of them. It's perceived risk versus actual risk. There's this inherent conflict in the public discussion. The discussion that the book is having is like very technical. The discussion that the public has is very visceral. So there's, you know, discussion that you have in academic circles versus the discussion that you have out in the public. I think they're just very different.
That's a great point.
Just one more thing to that is that, sorry, when you talked about an issue like turn radii, yeah, it might be safer to have a smaller radii, but then you're not thinking about heavy vehicles like, trucks and military vehicles that need that. Same thing with lane width. Yeah, you might encourage lower speeds, but for certain vehicles, they require or need that additional width. So there's both pros and cons of, going with one design over another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you have areas like the port and trying to get all the trucks down Hampton Boulevard or anything like that. Similar to Jamie's point, we tried a lane reduction on Hampton Boulevard 2018, I want to say. And we made the mistake of saying, we'll use that extra lane for bike lanes. And everyone lost their minds. Fast forward, pandemic happened, everyone's speeding now. They want us to do something. They requested that we reduce the lanes. So yeah, we had to remind them they lost that opportunity on our resurfacing effort in 2018. So definitely a conversation needs to be had with the public.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of the academic part of it, I think that, if you had more ammunition for some of these things, like parking on the street has this X impact, 5 miles an hour on the speed or whatever, if we had more sound research like that, I think maybe you could, do a better job.
I would love to see more research on how to translate this information into the public, because we have so many social media tools now, and we use it to reach them on things like transit, and we know how to use it for certain parts of transportation. Like, how can we use it to translate this type of information for people? Because I haven't had a lot of luck. How can you translate traffic signals do not automatically make unsignalized intersections safer? Or how do you translate not just this is how innovative intersections work, but this is why they work, or this is why on-street parking works? I think research on how to help public opinion get to where academic opinion is would be really helpful.
Well, and to add on to that, getting them to actually agree with the data. Even, we can sit there and say we have all this data, all this research, and then they'll be like, I don't believe you.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Robert?
I would just say, Rob, the beauty of a democracy also is the fact that anybody can have an opinion.
Yeah.
Even if nobody else agrees with it. So when we talk about our transportation system, we always talk about the three-legged stool: engineering, enforcement, and education. And education kind of goes back to the public side of it. We can control the engineering to a degree. We can control the enforcement. The one piece we can't control is the public. The public is going to do what the public does. We all remember in school, we were taught as either as planners or as engineers, you design to the 85th percentile, you design to the 90th percentile, the 95th, even sometimes 98. One of the things I've learned in my career is it doesn't matter what percentile you design for, there's always somebody who break the rule. Because people are just daredevils that go out and do those things. We can't fix that. It's a wonderful thing to say we're just going to suddenly change it. I'll share with you about 20 years ago, I read there was a study in Scandinavia And they were really concerned about transportation safety. And one of the things that they decided, their city council decided, is they went in their city, they took down every traffic signal, they took down every sign, they took up every traffic marking on the roadway. They did away with it all. And their crash rate went to 0. But the reason was everybody was so concerned and cautious now that they were going to hit somebody, they were going to get hit. There was no control. They were super courteous. And that lasted for a period of time. And then some of them started getting a little braver, a little braver. And all of a sudden, chaos ensued because there was no control. Well, there's nothing here to tell me I can't do that. I can do that. You should have done so and so. And we went right back to society. Unfortunately, in society, we had to have some rules. We had to have some guidelines. It's kind of like his statement in there. Well, let's just put some more fixed objects on the side of the road and everybody will drive safer. No, we just kill out the dumb drivers quicker, right? Because they're going to run into the fixed objects. So much of what we do has been from experience over the last 100, 150 years as automobiles have come into play. So if you look back to automobiles in 1960 versus an automobile today, just look at the safety advancements in the design of the vehicle. Sometimes I think that's a bad thing because now people think they can drive more reckless because they got airbags and they got all these other things that's going to make up for bad driving. I'm just not sure there's a lot to be said for his book. I always kind of thought if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I appreciate the fact he's got an opinion. I just can't support it. And maybe some of the younger folks in the room here, as you guys move through your career, you'll figure out how to solve all these problems, but I'm not sure he's on the right path.
Okay. Alan?
I was thinking it's interesting because I was having a conversation recently about Vision Zero and how we kind of felt that in some ways the goal of zero became just like a throwaway because no one really believes that zero is a potential goal. But instead of saying reducing fatalities by 3% a year or something, and actually tracking that and actually setting ourselves goals that we could meet or be judged against, whether or not it's all in our control, may be more effective than just having a very sort of lofty goal that people can agree with, but no one is really tracking.
Yeah. And actually he criticizes Vision Zero also. I think for that reason, Yes, Francis.
Nice to say about the presentation. I like the concept of focusing on umbrella points versus hotspots. I think that was a good concept. It does get you to focus on the overall. And cities are, by and large, historically, we're proven to be reactive. A lot of times we just focus on the areas where it's the most issues. And so, I think just having that concept in mind is, I think, a good way to start looking at your planning and design to kind of get you out of that box instead of just focusing on. One other bullet that I thought was interesting where you said guidebooks promote over design. I do kind of agree with that in the sense that I think because a lot of the guidebooks have already been vetted so many times and there's a lot of research that goes into these guidebooks. But I think at some points it tips off to where it's a liability standpoint. People don't want to veer off what's standardized.
Right.
If you're liable for something.
Yeah. And speaking of that, he does get into the liability issue also. Yeah.
Kind of as a follow-up to Rob, one of the things I would like to reiterate, and again, you noted that in your slides, we always have engineering judgment responsibility. And the courts generally have been hard pressed to overrule engineering judgment if you've done your due diligence, you've documented why decisions were made. Yes, those guidelines are great, but if you need to deviate and you can justify it, that's part of our responsibility as engineers to do those things correctly. And again, have a reason why, be able to explain it. A lot of times, Jamie, the public doesn't like it. We just had to say, too bad, this is what we're gonna do. We have government overview. We got to do what's in the best interest of everybody, not the 3, 4, 5 people who live on this particular little piece of street. But I mean, again, it really comes down to engineering judgment overrides every other standard out there.
Thank you.
Well, to add to that, you got to have the political support to back you up too.
Got to have what?
I just want to, oh, go ahead. I think it was that. No, I just want to add one more thing to that too, because remember that, that, I don't know if it was apartment building or a condo building that fell in Florida.
Yes.
The whole thing collapsed.
Mhm.
And the first people they blamed were the engineers.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think there's just kind of that fear of engineers kind of stepping out of the box.
Mhm.
But anyhow.
We all know it was the contractors.
And I would just say one more thing too, with the idea of looking systematically instead of just hotspot to hotspot. One of the things I find too is usually when you look at a systematic solution, it kind of wraps up and takes care of a lot of those hotspots
Mhm.
in your network-wide solution.
Mhm.
Even if you're not even looking directly at that, usually the solution that you find over here alleviates a lot of times what's happening further down or
Mhm.
upstream or any of those things. A lot of times it fixes a wide range of things. So I do think that's a really good perspective to keep in mind.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, wrapping up the agenda here. You guys, we have our 3-month look ahead under item 12. Our next meeting will be May 7th. And then item 13, list of a few reports. Most of the bulk of that agenda is in there as well. Oops. And then lastly, we have the announcements under item 14. After this meeting, we have the Transportation Operations meeting over in the 757 room. We have the HRTP, or the Planning Organization Board meeting, April 17th. And our next meeting, like I said, will be May 7th. And then a few other notes in there as well. And then is there any old or new business to discuss?
One
Yes,
question
sir.
for staff. I do understand there is an upgrade coming to the AV systems in this room. Can you kind of talk about that just a second?
Well, actually, you have to call on John and Keith because this room, one of the challenges we have is it works well here, but if you're trying to have a hybrid, this room wasn't designed for it. Some of our meetings, we've had some issues with that. So our staff working group, and John and Keith are part of it, they've been working on some solutions for that. And Keith, you want to?
Yeah, she hit most of the high points. We're making, the big thing we're trying to do is make this room much more adaptable for hybrid meetings and virtual options, and upgrading the screens and everything like that. So we did go through a procurement process and we have signed a contractor on it. And actually SIPSA is the one who's overseeing the effort. We're just kind of tagging along, but I think it's around the month of July, since we have fewer meetings, that it's going to take them 3 weeks to update it. So we're looking at that time frame. But yeah, the main point is for having hybrid meetings be a valuable option for this room.
Yeah, one of the things I understand also sitting on the SIPSA board is, and you guys notice these screens sometimes are hard to see. The new system will be much brighter, much clearer, much better able to see in all lighting conditions, which is going to be a positive.
Yes, yeah, we're upgrading the laser projectors. We looked at the cost of having essentially TV walls and it was very prohibitive, but yeah, we are upgrading to much better laser projectors.
Thank you. Anything else? Business? All right, meeting adjourned.